Hello, everyone. Nice to see quite a few of you here already. As usual, I'm about 10 minutes early. So if you're watching this recorded and you don't want to, you might want to skip 10 minutes forward because I'm just like greeting everyone here, all the usual participants and the new subscribers, hopefully, that have been coming on. We're gonna have Clive and hopefully Rafi on today. So we had a really interesting week last week, especially Friday for silver. We're gonna cover that, and of course, we're gonna also be taking your questions. Yeah, Rudy's over there. Um, he's doing well. Nice to see all of you here. Jillian B, popping off. Uh, Janos Slovak, Darren Smith, Silver Beast, Pablo Pina, Blue Water Stacks, Universal Vibes TV, Quadman 72, Cozy Fantute. Good evening, Cozy Fantute, Dutch Libertarian, Urban Sombrero, Patty Jones, Jack Owen. Yeah, I had a. He says he likes my hair. Don't have much left, unfortunately, but I did have a trim this weekend. It was getting a little bit too wild on the side. Long-lived coins is here. Paul Weens from Southern Manitoba. Jeff Main in the house. Fox Moongaze from Hampshire. Joshua Porter. Yeah, they should be coming on in a few minutes. Clive and Rafi, hopefully. Rayleigh Boy from Essex. Melissa Bailey, also from Maine. Over here, alive in New York City. Arson Fire, good week for gold and silver. Well, it's been a good year as well. 2024, it's been pretty amazing. And I think a lot of people that don't follow gold, the mainstream, they're kind of puzzled. But I'm not puzzled. I think silver is still undervalued, and we're going to look at that, of course. David Whitworth, when gold gets to 3,000 ounces, you come on with a glass of whiskey. Um, I don't really drink too much. I don't really drink whiskey, but cigar. Yeah, I don't think it matters, these numbers anyway, but we don't want to get too excited or too despondent depending on what the price does. I think we need to start thinking of gold and silver as, uh, well, hopefully we've always been, but sometimes it's been frustrating as insurance because I think it's a bad sign. What the price of gold is doing is a bad sign for the whole system. And I think this kind of stuff, like coming on and having champagne or whiskey or a cigar, it's a bit rubbing it in. We need to keep a low profile, I think. Anyway, that's the way I see it, but who knows? Maybe I'll do it. If it gets to 30,000, then yeah, but 3,000 is not that much. I think uh not saying we're gonna go there very soon, but it looks like we could. Sorry, I got I went to play golf this morning and the weather was horrible. Um and I think I've got a bit of a chill. Andrew Bevins here. Yeah, as I said, Hannah, I played. We actually walked in after 11 holes. It was really the weather really turned. Hopefully it will get better this coming week. Chris Conman is here, says hi, Mario and Rudy. Melt up phasing coming. Yeah, and that's possible. I think that's the other thing. A lot of people are expecting for correction in the stock market, and it doesn't correct. We could be seeing the melt up, the crack up boom, which is something that yeah, has happened in different countries at different times, but never on a global scale. Never with the major reserve currency. So it's something really that we don't even know really what it's gonna be like. It's pretty unprecedented. Joker's Wild from the south of England. Nick the Greek. Yeah, I am a little bit under the weather. I think it was yeah. I'll get better though. That's fine. Robert Gifford from Glasgow. Over here says I had reported that the US national debt went up half a trillion in a few days due to the bond market. Is that true? I don't know if it's because of the bond market, because the bond market is a secondary market. Um, so it doesn't make any difference to the national debt. Maybe it's to do, I don't know, they revised something, who knows? But I noticed that they've revised the GDP up quite sharply. It's almost at 30 trillion. And the debt to GDP in the US debt clock, that had gone up to like 123.5%, and now it's gone back down 120 below 23. I think they've revised the GDP higher. Richard, to be true, can't hide silver in a dirty man's safe. Well, yeah, you can hide a bit of it. Yeah, silver's bulky. Well, you just tr need to keep it somewhere else, hide it somewhere else. Um, you got to be ha use your imagination. Or the other thing as well, aside from having physical, is having exposure to the silver miners. That's a way to play it too. Clive is coming on here. Marco Arostini from Arezzo in I think it's Tuscany, isn't it? Arezzo. Yeah. Hi, Clive.
Good evening, Mario. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yeah, I think Rafi's just showed up. I'm gonna let him in as well.
Great.
So I'm glad Rafi could make it. So yeah, I was talking to Clive earlier this weekend, and I told him I was gonna go to. Hi, Rafi.
Hi.
Hello, Rafi.
Hi. I'm traveling, so I'm not at home.
Yeah, it looks like it. Didn't recognize it. Where are you, Rafi?
I am in central Israel, trying to
Oh,
get out of the bomb zone for the holiday. So I'm at a friend's house,
yeah,
and it's a lot quieter here, actually.
that's good. That's good. Chris.
Good. Well, keep safe.
Yeah, Rafi, it's nice talking to you again. Chris Tippin, thank you for the super chat. It says, do you think Russia's planning to remonetize silver domestically? Uh, Not really. I mean, there was a story a couple of weeks ago about how they're going to start buying silver, palladium, and platinum to keep it in the Ministry of Finance. It's possible, but right now I don't see it. Um, Even though yeah, like I said, anything could happen. Do you guys have an opinion on that?
Well, in their budget, they've announced that they're putting silver in their, will be putting silver next year into the reserves for the first time ever. obviously it's going into their reserves, just as gold is going into the reserves. It doesn't mean to say they're going to issue a silver currency at this point. But another thing we need to talk about is the BRICS summit on the 22nd and 23rd of October, where there's a lot of talk about putting some gold into the new currency they're talking about, which is called the unit.
Yeah, I'll let Rafi answer in a minute, but yeah, I think the BRICS summit will be important. Like from the 22nd, it's also goes to the 24th, and I think the unit is more of a mechanism than the currency, but it's almost like they want to go back to a kind of gold standard where, of course, there won't be any gold coins or people won't use, be able to redeem their banknotes into gold, but they're planning to have the countries that move join that mechanism hold at least 40% of their reserves in gold. And I think that's how they're going to try to keep it fairly stable, even though I read Rafi's Endgame Investor, and I agree with him. It doesn't mean that they're going to have sound money, but one thing it's going to do, it's going to, instead of holding treasuries as reserves, yeah, they're going to start holding a lot more gold and a lot more of other countries' currencies. So Rafi, yeah, what's your take on the silver and Russia, and then also the BRICS?
I didn't hear about that actually, Clive, that Russia's gonna add silver to their reserves. I think that I wouldn't have thought they would do that. That's a pretty unique announcement, I'd say, because I've never heard of any central bank holding silver for any reason. It's usually it's gold that they hold, silver they don't. But if they're gonna do it, okay. Um, I think a more important point to emphasize here is that no central bank or government entity or quasi-government entity wants sound money. It's not like any of them are rooting for it or any of them want to actually be responsible, or they're looking out for the common man and they want us to have functional money. That none of them are doing that. So none of them want gold or silver money, but they do want to get away from American dominance. And the reason is obvious because America can just steal from you if you use their treasuries or their derivatives as reserves. They can just suddenly just cut you off from their derivatives, and therefore you don't have anything anymore because you can't redeem them you can't use them anymore. So that's what happened to Russia. Russia didn't like that. Say what you want about it. The U.S. is at war with Russia, or a proxy war with Russia, and so maybe Russia deserved it or they didn't. It doesn't matter. Um, once the U.S. does that, it's going to make the world vote against their derivatives. And with BRICS, Mario hinted at this earlier that I don't see the unit itself as anything special. I mean, it could be. I could be wrong. I mean, we'll see what happens when it comes out. Um, and if I'm wrong, fine. I mean, I own gold and silver anyway, so I'd be happy if the unit were to somehow collapse the dollar and make gold and silver go to the moon wherever they're supposed to go. I'd be happy. I wouldn't be disappointed to be wrong in this case, but I think that the much more significant point of the unit is creating the infrastructure to get around U.S. sanctions, to get around U.S. dominance. And it's already the case that the U.S. cannot export its inflation through treasuries that much anymore because other countries are bankrupt and they don't want more treasuries. So if you look at the breakdown of who owns U.S. debt, the percentage of foreign ownership of total U.S. debt has been going down since I think 2013, if I'm not mistaken. So
I think it's
we're
the
already,
lowest. I think it's the
yeah,
lowest in 25 years, Rafi. Is
yeah.
it down to 57% now, dollar reserves, the lowest in 25 years?
Okay, so yeah, it's been happening for 25 years, and I think that's dollar reserves, and I think for treasuries specifically, it's even worse. Or whatever the details are. It's not like it's not like this is a new thing that the unit is going to create a new trend. It's just going to continue the current one. So maybe it'll accelerate it, maybe it won't. Maybe we're already in the end game. We'll see what happens on Monday, what happens to silver. If silver goes up 10-15% on Monday, we're closer. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and just wanted to add to what Rafi said there, and I agree with him. Politicians and governments around the world. They don't like gold and silver because it puts a straitjacket on how much they can spend. I think it was Alan Greenspan who wrote in 1966 an essay about gold and economic freedom, and he said, "Yeah, statists hate gold because it disciplines them, and I think the only way we can get away from what we have today is if the people demand it. People have to wake up and actually say, we don't want big government. We want sound money. And I think we're still far away from it. And Rafi, I think what's happening to gold and silver right now is some people are waking up to that analogy that you make about the tree and the apple. Can you talk a little bit about that? I really like that to explain what inflation is.
Yeah, so I think I've said it once here on this show. Maybe it was a while ago, so new viewers, but it does really help understand what's going on. That the First of all, when governments inflate, they can't create value. They can only take value from value that already exists. So they can basically steal from you who's producing, because governments don't produce anything. And what they do produce, they produce at great cost and at a lot of debt. So you could say, well, they produce nuclear weapons. Well, first of all, great nuclear weapons. It really helps all of us. And but they produce it at a lot of cost. So you could have something like the Soviet Union say that they're fantastic at producing weapons or whatever. I'm sure they had one or two things that were really good, but everyone was starving and nobody had a productive jobs. You can hide that. So anyway, the point is that inflation can only take from the people, and it basically it takes from the value of the currency. So they're picking your pocket without you realizing, as long as they do it slow enough. And if you can, what the goal is if they can get you to produce faster than they can steal from you so that you notice it less, then they can keep stealing from you. It's like the analogy is if you have an apple tree or any kind of fruit tree in your backyard and it's really, really productive, then if your neighbor comes and swipes a few apples from you every night, you're not going to notice and you'll keep tending to the tree. And that's what your neighbor wants. He just wants to eat off your productivity without you noticing and going to attack him, right? Because he just wants to keep eating. Um, so, I mean, the problem is your neighbor, he's inviting his buddies over for, lavish dinner parties every night, and he needs to steal more apples from you in order to satisfy his guests. And sooner or later, you're going to realize that, there's a lot of apples missing from your tree. And if you can't increase the productivity of the tree to the point where you don't realize that he's stealing more and more from you, then you're going to start looking at your neighbor and installing security cameras and seeing and realizing that he is actually stealing from you. And if you can do something about it, you'll shoot your neighbor, you'll attack him, you'll call the police. If you can't do anything because he is the police, then what you'll do is you'll chop down the tree and you'll say, I'm not going to let you steal it anymore, and we'll both starve. And that's hyperinflation. And then what happens is you both starve, and then he goes away, and then you plant a new tree, which hopefully this time will be gold and silver, and you start building again.
Yeah, and talking about hyperinflation, Rafi, I wanted to show this chart here, and I wanted to ask Clive what he thinks about this, because this is a chart of the gold mark and paper marks from 1918 to 1923. And notice how it went up here quite a bit in beginning of 1920, and then it consolidated, and then it tried to break that level. It kind of had a bit of difficulty, and then it took off. And Clive, I want to show you this chart here. This is the gold in dollars. I know the period of time is bigger, but it looks very similar.
Yeah.
You
The
know,
same fractal pattern you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah, gold takes off and then it goes back up, tries, consolidates. And now we're taking off, Clive. And what happened with silver, I think, is yeah, pretty important. And we've been waiting, I think, for about 3 years because I remember being here on I think it was beginning of February 2021 when the silver squeeze movement was around. And everyone thought, oh, this is it. Silver's going to take off now. And I was a little bit, how can I say, skeptical because I thought they would come after silver, and they have, but I think now it looks like silver could really take off. So, Clive, I'll let you.
Well, Friday was really amazing for the silver price. We started off with a very slow day, and I'm going to be talking European times here, Central European times, where I am in Switzerland. By at the open, which was effectively midnight European time, it was $31.70, and then by just after lunch at 1 p.m., it was 32.09, which was just a little bit higher than the midnight price. At 3 o'clock, it was starting to creep up a little bit faster. It was up about 1% at 32.31. And by 6 p.m., our time, it was up another 1%. So it was up 2% on the day at 32.64. And then after 6, that's after the European markets had closed, it really took off. It started to accelerate away. So 3 hours later, at 9 o'clock, it was a full dollar higher, 33.61, and then it closed at effectively midnight our time. It stopped trading. That was 33.71, which was about 6.5%, 7%, getting over 7% higher than what it opened at. Now, what I tried to burrow down and find an underlying cause for the silver price, and I couldn't really find anything. But one thing which I did notice was that Reddit had come alive with silver stories. And you may remember a couple of years ago there was when people were playing GameStop and a few other hot stocks in America via Reddit. Silver was one of the plays back then, and it kind of spluttered out. But once again, the silver boys are back on Reddit saying, here it goes, silver's going to the moon. So I don't know if this is going to turn into a movement by the general populace, but it might. I also had a look at the various forecasts which are out there for silver. I see that, or at least I heard, I didn't see it myself, that Bank of America and UBS have put silver into their buy list with quite high targets. I forget what they were, but I thought they were quite much higher than today's price. And I also looked around the various other uh, people who are forecasting silver, particularly the contract CFD sites. So all of them are forecasting a higher price. The range is typically around within a few days, around $35.50. Don't forget, we're 33.71 at the close on Friday. So people are thinking by the end of this week, which is coming, we could be at 35 something. I see City Index is even going as far as saying it might make 36.20, which would be quite a hefty move. That would be what, another 10%, 15% from where we are now. So, yeah, silver is looking pretty bullish. But perhaps there's one thing which people haven't quite noticed, and that's a crash in something which is quite interesting. What has crashed with the silver price rise is the gold silver ratio. The gold silver ratio has been around 85, well, yesterday, or rather Thursday. And by Friday's close, it was down to 80.80. What that means is that silver is rising proportionally much faster than the gold price. So what's a normal ratio, the gold silver ratio? Rafi, you may have an opinion on this. I think it should be around 40 times. I know there's plenty of people who say it should be 15 times. But if it was 40 times, that means silver could, relative to gold, double from here. What do you think, Rafi?
What should it be? I don't know if there's
Can
like
I just,
around,
sorry, Rafi,
yeah.
just want to show you here. David Morgan tweeted this out over the weekend, the gold silver ratio through history. And all the way back to 1700. It's always been around between 10 and 15, but just want to put that out there. So go ahead, Rafi.
Yeah, well, I do know that around the let's say the year 200 to 400, that era, it was 25 to 1, at least in Jewish law. That's the Jewish law ratio of gold to silver coins measuring denarius weights. It doesn't mean that's like it's supposed to be a hard ratio, but that's what it was back then. So that's what Jewish law works with. In terms of what should it be, I don't think there's any hard ratio that it should be. The question really is, if we assume that gold and silver coins are both being used for exchange in equal proportions, or I mean not in equal proportions, but let's say there's no government money. Everything, all money markets are private, and there's competing currencies, and there's gold and silver currencies, and there's no artificial advantage for any of them. Then what would the gold to silver ratio be under that free market conditions? I think it would be somewhere between 15 and 20 to 1. But I'm just guessing because we've never had that in the modern era. If we go to strictly a gold currency, and silver is not used, which is probably more natural, because silver is hard to use. I mean, it's very bulky. You only use it if gold derivatives aren't working these days. So I'd say maybe 30 to 41 makes more sense. But either way, it's higher than 80. So
Yeah.
Mario, am I able to share here?
Yeah, let me can I just show this one? This is the gold silver ratio here. I mean in 2011 we went down to around 31. So yeah, 40 is very realistic. And let me allow you to share. Hold on. And I think in 1980 um we went to 15 to 1 because gold silver went to 50 and gold went to 800. So that was about 15 to 1. So you can share now, Rafi.
Yeah. So this is from Gold Charts or Us. And it's a 5-year chart of silver from 1975 to 1979. So we have here, okay, so from 1975 to 1979, it didn't do much at all, right? It meandered up very slightly by 1979, but there's not much movement there. And then all of a sudden, beginning of 1979, you see a big move from about $6 to, let's say, $8, and then to 850 through the year, and then all of a sudden it's just like took off all at once. And meanwhile, gold from 1975 to 1979 was moving steadily higher. Silver wasn't. So my thesis here, what I wrote in the Endgame Investor, is that I think we're in 1979, and if I'm right, uh, if I'm right, then we should start to see silver outperforming gold heavily. I don't know if Friday was the beginning of that. It might be. I mean, thing is, I've been in this long enough, not as long as Clive and not as long as you, Mario, but I've been excited by sudden silver moves many times in the past, and I'm taking it one day at a time now, and I'm not calling, oh, this is it, definitely. I hope it is, but might not be, but we'll see what happens in the next few weeks.
I agree with you. I try to stay even keel no matter what happens now. So there's a couple of super chats here. Bob Hunter, thank you, Bob. Says invest in nuclear bums. It will blow your mind. And then he says as well, is it worthwhile while investing in ostriches? I'm not sure what he means there. But nuclear, yeah, I heard that Amazon and other big tech companies are looking to invest in nuclear power plants because they want to use them to power their data centers. Yeah, I've made a few promotional videos here over the last 2, 3 years about uranium mining companies like Uranium Energy Corp. There's loads of them out there. I think they'll probably do well. Have you guys got any view on it, Clive? Uranium?
I think that we're going to have more nuclear power stations, and the uranium's in hard to get at places. I think it's in places like Russia. So mostly. So, I think it's probably, I haven't got any uranium connections, but I think it's probably not a bad idea to be invested in uranium if you can find a way to do it. I know there's a unit trust, not a unit trust, an ETF out there which has some exposure to uranium, but I don't suppose it's the physical metal because that would be radioactive, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think U Uranium Energy Corp, they, or it could be UROI, but I think it's UEC. They hold the commodity. So when you buy their stock, you're indirectly holding, well, not holding, but you own indirectly uranium. Um,
And as for ostriches, perhaps you remember, it must have been 25 years ago, Mario. That was one of the biggest UK, especially the UK, it's one of the biggest scams we had 25 years ago. Everybody was being enticed to buy ostriches. The promise being the ostrich meat was the greatest meat in the planet and the eggs were going to be so delicious. But when the push came to the shove and people went to get their ostrich eggs or their ostrich meat or their profit from selling ostriches, it turned out the ostriches weren't there and the whole thing collapsed.
oh, I hadn't heard about that.
I
Oh,
didn't know there was an ostrich bubble. That's cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a huge scam. It must have been 25 years ago. It was when maybe 50 years ago. It was when I was
yeah.
a young man anyway.
Yeah, so it was more than 25 years ago because I've been here since 1992 and I don't remember it. But uh, Tyson Bolter, thank you for your super chat. And he says, "Have you read Warriors Gold, Mario? If not, I think you would enjoy it. It's about CIA stealing the gold Japan hid in the Philippines after World War II. I think I have read stories about that. It's what's it called? Yamashita's gold, and that they hid it, the Japanese hid a lot of gold that they plundered from throughout Asia, especially China. They hid it in the Philippines. And one of the reasons why Ferdinand Marcos became so powerful is because he knew where that gold was. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stories about that, but and I think there are people who go to the Philippines to look for this gold, but they never find it.
That's another place where there's a lot of scams coming out. People keep writing to me and saying that they got some gold from this cave in the Philippines. Of course, it doesn't exist. I mean, maybe it does exist, but it's certainly not from the people who are writing to me to suggest I can buy it at a discount.
Yeah, Clive, I told you I was gonna go to not the bullion dealer, but in Bromley, there's a coin and metal dealer. He does metals, coins, numismatics. And sometimes he gets people selling bullion to him, like gold and silver. And he told me, I went there yesterday and he said he doesn't have any gold. Everyone wants to buy gold. He had some silver. He had 25 of these, Clive, they're kangaroos, 2017. And he made a,
They're nice.
yeah, he made a, so I got the whole thing. He made a pretty good price for me, 29 pounds and no VAT because it's not new, it's secondhand, and he doesn't charge VAT. So 29 pounds, the spot price is just around 26. So I thought that was pretty good. If you go to the normal bullion dealers, they're charging the VAT. It's like 35 or 36. So yeah, added on to my stack. And talking about gold and silver, Rafi, in physical, there's a story about Israel wanting to ban gold and silver ownership a few weeks ago. I covered it, but one thing you've always said to me is that Israelis are not really much into gold and silver. So why do you think they're talking about that?
It wasn't a direct ban on gold and silver ownership. What was going on was they were that Netanyahu was looking to ban the 200 shekel bill and not ban it, but demonetize it. His goal was to get that's the highest denomination of currency that we have, And the way he was marketing it was, Hamas, they deal in cash and they have a whole bunch of 200 shekel bills. So if we demonetize them, we can get rid of they have a lot of financial problems. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, let's do it. And they just killed a 19-year-old soldier just killed Sinwar a few days ago. And on his person was about 40,000 shekels and 200 shekel bills. So it's true. But what he was really trying to do is get the underground untaxed economy back into the banking system so you could tax it. Because what would happen was that people would deposit their 200 shekel bills into the bank system before it gets demonetized. They can't use it anymore, and they're going to lose all that value. And I can personally attest to when those rumors were flying. It's not happening now because the banking official said no, and because Netanyahu stepped on their authority, and nobody really likes Netanyahu, especially in the deep state. He's sort of deep state. He's sort of not. It's like it's very difficult to pin him down exactly where he is
Yeah.
on the deep state picture.
Do you think
Um,
just a quick question,
yeah.
nobody likes them. Do you think people would have been happy if they had succeeded with the drones?
Oh, getting his house?
Yeah.
No, no, no. We still don't want him to get killed. I mean,
But
we
it's
don't.
understandable that they try to kill him, I think, because uh,
I don't.
they've been killing a lot of like other people. So, but anyway,
Yeah, they're not going to get close to him. They hit his house with a drone. And I think they like burnt some trees. They're
yeah,
they're not they're not anywhere close to it. But I can't say that I'm glad his house was bombed,
yeah,
but I'm cautiously optimistic that maybe he'll take this personally and do what needs to be done. And I can imagine what that might be, but I won't talk about it.
yeah,
Um, so the Bank of Israel is shutting that down, and in that bill, in that proposal to make to demonetize the 200 shekel bill, was to prevent people from using gold and silver instead and hoarding that. Right. So I got a few calls from people once if when they thought that the 200 shekel bill was going to be demonetized, that Rafi, I'm looking for like 80,000 shekels in gold. Can you hook me up with somebody? I was like, I don't know. I don't have that much.
Oh, so
Um,
that was a reaction
yeah.
to
Yeah,
that.
so people wanted to all give somebody their 200 shekel bills and get gold instead, so they wouldn't have to put it in the bank system, so they have something to hold the value of it. And then when the Bank of Israel or whoever saw that this was the consequence of it, the demand for gold went up. They're like, let's not do this, forget it.
Yeah. Henrik asked from Sweden. Thank you for the super chat. He says your thoughts on the meeting in Kazan. He means the BRICS meeting. Yeah, I think it's going to be important. But the West, the mainstream media in the West, they're completely ignoring it. And I think, yeah, and it could be one of the reasons why we're seeing gold and silver do so well, because they might announce something quite big in terms of yeah, of their new monetary uh not new currency, but monetary architecture, how they're gonna try to get away from the dollar. So yeah, I think it could be really important.
Uh,
Clive?
I looked for the official agenda of the meeting in is it Kazan, which is I think somewhere in Russia. I couldn't find it anywhere, but it's widely documented that they are going to be discussing a new unit, and that will in some way either be backed 40% by gold, or the countries will have to hold 40% in gold in their reserves to keep their currency stable when they trade in this unit between one and the other. So I think that announcement isn't in the public domain very much at the moment. But I think if they do discuss it and something is agreed, it'll have a significant impact on the gold price, because all these countries will need to acquire enough gold to keep their gold versus reserves balance in at the right ratio.
Yeah, and someone asked if Turkey is going to be there. I think they are. There's over 40 countries that are not part of BRICS Plus who are going to attend. Yeah, so and there might even be more. That's the other thing. If they announce more countries, and let's say they say, oh, next year there's going to be 20 new countries joining. I think it could be big because, like Rafi said, all these countries are trying to find an alternative to the dollar. The other thing that is playing here, I think, is let's say Trump, he's being quite aggressive about punishing countries that don't use the dollar. He said he's going to put 100% tariffs on their exports to the U.S. Some people say, well, that he's just trying to negotiate. He's starting at 100, but I think it's going to push more and more countries to do business outside the West. So yeah, it's going to be an important summit. It starts, I think, on Tuesday and ends on Thursday. Rafi, I think you've talked about it already, but if you want to add anything.
About the BRICS summit,
Yeah.
um, it's geopolitically, it is very significant. Monetarily, I don't think it's going to lead to much in the short term. I think the end game is going to come first before they get anything seriously organized. But once the dollar does collapse, I think it's important that these countries do have they hit the ground running on the end game and they're already talking to each other. So hopefully it'll get some kind of global system up and running based on gold and silver that will be smoother than otherwise. I mean, it's always good when countries talk and actually I can't say that. It's not always good because usually they're up to no good, but talking itself and leaders of countries talking it's not itself a bad thing. Depends what they're talking about. And if they're trying to cooperate, it's a good thing. And if they're trying to steal from us, it's a bad thing. So
Yeah.
we'll see what it is.
Well, it's always better to talk than fight as well. But anyway, Dutch Libertarian says USA bank collapse yesterday. Yeah, I saw that there was a bank in Oklahoma that went under, but I'm not sure how big it was. And, people are still looking at that, all the unrealized losses and from the banks, from the FDIC. That's still huge. And the title of this live stream is like silver breaks out, right? And then there's another question: Are the banks in trouble? Because every time silver has gone like ballistic, we've had major crises. Some people don't think silver is that important, but I think it is. In 1980, you had a huge crisis. Paul Volcker had to raise rates to 20%. And then in 2011 as well, we had the European sovereign debt crisis and silver went to 50. So, Clive, do you think there's more trouble? Gold and silver are pointing to troubles that we don't know yet.
Every time the price of something moves a long way and quickly, there's always going to be someone at the wrong end. What you never know is whether that person who's at the wrong end is a small fry and it doesn't really make any difference to the world, or whether it's about to blow up the world. The one of the big things we saw was when the dollar was strengthening back in the 1980s, and we had it was the 1990s, we had the dollar crisis, the Far East currency crisis, as they called it, because it turned out that as the dollar rose, and nobody really knew this before it happened, that just about every company in Asia had decided to take out their borrowings in US dollars rather than local currency because they saw it as a lower interest way of borrowing money because their currency was officially fixed against the US dollar, and therefore why borrow in local currency when you could borrow from in the US dollar cheaper? So that's what they did. But then, of course, there was a big move, and every company had to rush for the door and try and close down their dollar exposure, and that meant effectively back then buying the dollar, a collapse of the Asian currencies, and a collapse of the stock market. But over and over again, we see a situation where someone is caught out at the wrong end, and sometimes it's really, really big, and it threatens the system, as we had with long-term capital management back in the 1990s as well. So we don't know who's at the wrong end of this, but for sure, there's going to be some people who are short silver. They're feeling the heat, especially on Friday, as it went. As I mentioned, the silver price rose towards the close of trading very, very rapidly, and a lot of those people who are short will be now getting margin calls. They'll have to pay up on Monday, and if they can't pay up or don't want to pay up, then they'll be forced to buy back the silver that they shorted. So it's just a guess from my end, but I'm guessing that the silver price is going further up on Monday. The question is, will it drag gold up with it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the bullion banks and the big US banks, they have huge shorts in silver. I think 700 million ounces. So with that,
Where do you get that number from? 700 million.
yeah, that's the open interest in the COMEX.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Chris Conman, though, thank you for your super chat. He says, at what price level for silver do you think the bullion banks will finally lose control of it? Thanks. I'll answer it first and let you guys answer. I think it's more the speed of the move, not the price. So if silver because silver's gone from below 20, I think, last year at one point, and now we're like above 30. So it's gone up a lot, but they've been able to, it's a slow move. I think what's bad for the bullion banks is if silver, let's say this coming week goes up to breaks 35, goes to 40, and then is at 50 by the end of the week, that they will be in trouble. But before that happens, I think COMEX is going to do with the regulators, they're going to do everything to try to stop that. One of the things they usually do is to raise the margins because it shakes out like the small speculators and makes them like have to sell. So I'll let Rafi answer that as well.
Yeah, well, look, when we see silver on the move, usually it goes on the move very, very quickly. The moves to 50 in 1980 it took was it like eight months from about let's say $8 to $50 in about 8 months, and most of that was in the last month or two. And in 2011 we saw the same thing. It took maybe 6 to 8 months for it to go from maybe it was 15 to 50. So we already know silver can move like this and does move like this. And monetarily, what I describe it as if banks chase gold when they lose faith in the dollar, the public is like a huge bank, but it can't use gold, so it uses silver instead. So that's why silver has the huge move at the end when suddenly the public wakes up and there's a monetary crisis. They go to the most liquid commodity. When you're trying to preserve value, you try to preserve the value in the most liquid commodity that you can find, which is again exactly why when there was rumors of the 200 shekel bill being demonetized, I was getting calls of people wanting 80 to 100,000 shekels of gold in like a week. Um, so that's like that's a little taste of an end game. That's what happens. So when the money is dying, either because of hyperinflation or because of government decree that they're going to kill a certain bill, people are going to go to gold and silver. That's what they do. Even here in Israel, where very few people have a gold and silver consciousness, it's still there. And I wanted to share one more article that I just saw that's happening right now. If we're talking about banks and fiat systems and this and that. There's just what's happening right now. This is the English version of Ynet. This is Israel's most popular newspaper. IDF targets Hezbollah's financial institutions. The Israeli army is now bombing banks in Beirut to try to kill Hezbollah financially. So who knows if that's going to happen somewhere else in the world. I don't know. It's all dangerous to be invested in fiat, especially when an army bombs it.
Yeah, Clive, yeah, well, your take on that.
Well, I think the bullion banks are in trouble if the silver price goes to $50 next week. I'm not sure that's going to happen. And I think we have to remember that the exchanges need the shorts a lot more than they need the longs. The shorts are very, very big players. They're the big bullion banks. So there's only a very small number of shorts, but there's an awful lot of longs with very small long positions, but very few shorts. So what they're going to do if the silver price does rise extremely rapidly next week, which is entirely possible, they're going to step in, change the rules. They'll raise the margins. They will limit the number of contracts you can hold. There'll be all kinds of rule changes to stop people going long and to force the longs to liquidate their positions to stop the shorts from failing. We saw this in the London when the nickel price went to the moon a couple of years ago. The exchange basically said we're changing the rules. We're going to cancel a bunch of contracts and we're going to stop people trading. So I think they'll do their best to stop the price from rising too high. Yeah, I think if they don't do it and they allow it to run freely, silver could go very fast, and it could put some banks in trouble.
What are
Yeah,
we
and
looking at? What are we looking at here
yeah,
in this
this is
graph?
the Office of Controller of the Currency quarterly report. And this is the amount of sh notional amounts of precious metals contract by maturity. So these are the big New York banks. That's how, look how much it's increased. Um, it's just shot up massively uh, at the end of 2022, 2023, and it's still going up. I mean, compared to the previous years. And this is just, I think, what they report to the on COMEX. It could be the derivatives market as well, because people forget the LBMA in London is a much bigger, it's much bigger probably than COMEX, because in London there's no limit to how much you can hypothecate. But yeah, so this is really interesting here, Rafi. So a lot of people are noting that Bank of America got heavily involved in precious metals, and they're also like in trouble with because they bought a lot of treasuries in 2020, 2021, and they've got like 100 billion, I think, in unrealized losses. So Bank of and what's his name? Warren Buffett has been selling a lot of Bank of America stocks. So who knows? I'm not saying they're in trouble, but it could be one of the banks that doesn't want to see silver go up too much.
Oh, Clive, I had a question. You said that the market relies on the shorts more than the longs, but don't the amount of shorts have to equal the amount of longs? So what
Yeah.
exactly are you referring to?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The amount of shorts and longs will always balance out in terms of number of contracts. What I mean is that the number in terms of institutions who are shorting silver are far less than the number of people and institutions going long. So you'll have
Oh, okay.
a small number of very large shorts
Yeah, the
providing the
Okay.
short
the
the
concentration.
contract the other side of the contract to the many thousands of longs.
Oh, okay. So I see. So therefore, if one of those institutions is in trouble and they can't short anymore, then all of a sudden you have like the same amount of demand on the long side with the less supply on the short side, and then the price has to go up in order for some of the longs to sell out to balance out again. That's the point.
Yeah, that's it. And then of
Okay.
course the if it goes too far, the exchange might bring in all kinds of new measures to force the longs to reduce or liquidate their positions, as they did when the we had the Hunt brothers silver boom. Basically, in the middle of the Hunt brothers who were trying to effectively corner the market, they changed the rules on the brothers and said you can't own more than so many contracts. You can't take physical delivery. All kinds of new rules were brought in to stop the silver price from rising further than $50.
Yeah, and I read that Paul Volcker, he was chairman of the Fed. They met with the CFTC and the Wall Street banks because apparently there was a big brokerage house that was in trouble because of silver going up so quickly. And what they did is they said you can't buy futures anymore. So basically, they ban people from buying. So everyone, like for opening new positions, right? So that's what got silver to stop going up.
So,
And they could do it again.
so my guess is, I'm just formulating this in my head now that so in 1980 that helped squash or quench the end game fever that was going on back then.
Yeah.
But if we're really in an end game scenario now, they will try those tricks again for sure. And if we're really in the end game, then what should happen is that the demand that was in the futures market should bleed out and transfer to the physical market. You should see very, very high premiums, and like the price in the futures going up and up and up should stop there because of the rules, and then bleed into the physical market where premiums will go higher and higher and higher, and you just nobody would be able to order anything physical.
Yeah, that could be what happens because I think back then there are a lot of small people just doing the futures, but we'll have to wait and see. And I think back then as well, there's a lot of people who still had like the silver cutlery and all this stuff, and they use that as an opportunity to sell. But nowadays, if you talk to people, very few people have silver, so I don't think they'd be as successful. Bob Hunter, thank you for your super chat. Excuse me. He says you can never centralize humanity as the global elite wants. We are all unique, diverse, and precious in our own way. Please don't throw me into a melting pot, as I like my individuality and my own thought. I agree with that 100%, Bob.
What? What? All men are not equal.
Resistance is futile.
Yeah,
We can force you to be free.
I'm gonna click. Oh, I can click. I've just liked that comment there. I couldn't click it. Uh, there's another super chat here. Let's see. Full of hope. Thank you. First National Bank of Lindsay. I think that's the Oklahoma bank. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of small banks that go under, and then what's it called? What's the bank regulator, Rafi? I forgot now.
Where?
FDIC.
US.
Oh, yeah, the FDIC. No.
FDIC.
That's the I
Yeah, it's
forgot.
FDIC. They probably,
Yeah.
they will make the depositors whole and then they'll get another bank to buy the assets. But first it looks like there's a bank in Oklahoma that's going under. I'm not sure if it's that serious and how big it is. I can have a look at it. Uh First.
There's always a question when a bank goes bust. Is it because of some internal fraud? Is it something to do with theft? Or is it because they invested their money unwisely
Yeah,
in risky borrowers?
yeah. Here we go. Failed bank. It's from the FDIC actually. Hold on. But what we have to worry about is if it's Bank of America, they come out and say Bank of America. But let's see this bank. I never heard of it. October 14th, failed bank information for the First National Bank of Lindsay. On Friday, October 18th, uh, Lindsay was closed by the Office of Controller of the Currency. The FDIC was named receiver. No advance notice is given to the public when a financial institution is closed. All insured deposits have been transferred to the First Bank and Trust of Duncan, Oklahoma. Um, yeah, I'm not sure how big this bank is, but I think, yeah, they probably made depositors whole, but not for it says for accounts exceeding 250,000 that appear to be related and exceed this limit are reviewed by the FDIC to determine ownership and insurance coverage. Do you guys remember last year when SVB went bust, the US government basically covered everyone, the billionaires that had a lot of money there that lost money. And then there's a senator from Oklahoma, I think he was asking Janet Yellen, well, what if it's a bank in Oklahoma and are you gonna bail out people that have over 250,000. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, she didn't answer that question. So they're obviously there's no absolute guarantee they're going to bail you out if you have an uninsured deposit. If it threatens the system, I suppose they will try and do that if they can, but we mustn't forget the FDIC has limited resources. I don't know how much it's got, but it can only bail out. I think I read the number something like 1% of the banks, and if there's any more than that going under, um, they'll have to raise some cash from what the Treasury or somewhere like that.
Yeah, the coverage is about 1%. Yeah.
Of all deposits, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not much. It's the same thing here in the UK. And I think here in the UK it's 80,000 that they guarantee. And if it's a joint account, it's 160,000 pounds. Do you have that in Israel as well? Uh, Insurance like that?
Deposit insurance.
Mm.
I think there is. I don't know exactly how it works or if it's the same as the FDIC, but I think there is. But again, we went through hyperinflation here in 1984,
Mm.
and what they did was they reset the currency, and all mortgages were reset. Basically, it was a reset for the whole country, and that was actually during the first Lebanon War, and now we're
Yeah.
in the third one. Maybe it'll lead to another reset. That'd be nice. Actually, I came across this paragraph in that article that I shared before. I think it would be really interesting for the viewers to see this. I say that it's all these wars. All wars are funded by dollars, and then you think like, well, there's sanctions on Iran and they can't get dollars, but this is how they do it. It says here these banks, which the IDF plans to attack, hold Iranian currency converted into dollars in Syria, arriving in Lebanon in suitcases, hundreds to millions to $1 billion in cash annually. And down here,
Hmm.
it says it operates 35 branches. This is the bank that the IDF is going to attack tonight, apparently. Across Lebanon with ATMs. According to IDF, all of Hezbollah's financial reserves are held in cash and gold at these branches because they're locked out of the SWIFT system because they're considered a terrorist organization, but they can still operate in US dollar cash and gold, which is what's being
Yeah.
stored in these banks.
I mean, the best thing would be if the dollar collapsed, then a lot of these wars would stop right away.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. These people would lose out. So who knows? We'll have to see. Um, let's look at some of the questions. Oh yeah, there's a question here that I saw. Someone is saying bank bail-in season right now. I'm not sure. We'll have to see, if this is a one-off. This First National Bank of Lindsay, Oklahoma. Uh, Alex, how can the government protect the deposit if they're skint? They will print. Well, I think a lot of the FDIC insurance is actually paid in by the banks themselves. So the problem is that they can bail out small banks, but if there's a systemic crisis, there's no way they can cover the whole thing, as Clive and Rafi said. And Clive and Rafi, the FDIC is a product. I guess you read the diaries of Benjamin Roth, Rafi. FDIC is a product of the Great Depression because there's so many bank failures in the early 30s. That's some people don't realize how that it was not just a stock market crash, but all the bank failures that were really bad during the Great Depression, and it's one of the reasons why FDR started the FDIC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the problem is that the bank failures didn't go far enough. They should have just been all allowed to fail, and then the FDIC prolonged the problem, and we have what we have now. That was the first step towards communism, was the 1930s, and
Yeah.
there was a big break on it, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s until the 2000s really, and then in 2008, that was like the continuation of the New Deal from then on to now, and now we're heading into the end of it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It also makes the general public complacent because they think, it's guaranteed, and they don't really look into the nature of the banks and the monetary system. Bob Hunter, thank you for a super chat. Bank of Bill Gates injected billions of dollars into a new global opportunity for his new mention in a hole in the ground. Not sure what that is. But Clive, any comments on the FDIC and in Switzerland there's a bank guarantee. I think it's 80,000 francs or maybe 100.
I think it's 100, but I'd have to check that. I mean, there's a very important point to make about bank guarantees. If you have money in the bank and you have borrowed money from the same bank, let's say for a mortgage, if your bank fails, you won't get your money. You can't set off your deposit against what you owe. So if your deposit is not insured, you'll lose that, but you will still owe the money you owe on the mortgage. And that mortgage or that loan that you've got from the bank will be passed to another bank, so it'll become an asset of another bank. It will remain your liability. You will still have to repay your loan, even though your deposit may have gone up in smoke.
Yeah, that's why I mean I read something well that the banks they're paying their depositors really low rates on savings, not just in the US, but in the UK as well. I've seen it with NatWest in the last 2.5 years, even though rates have gone to 5%. I get less than 2% in the savings. And I think there was an article a couple of weeks ago that the big banks have made $1 trillion in profits because of that. And my solution to that, if you're annoyed that the banks are like ripping you off, is don't leave that much with them. Buy gold and silver. Take it out of the banks. I mean, it's simple.
I mean, I'm not personally worried about the having too much in the bank. I will never have so much money in the bank that I'd meet the or be above the insured amount. So if my balance does seem a little bit high, I'll pop down to the coin shop and buy myself some coins, or I'll buy some shares in the stock market. I'm not going to leave it in cash. It doesn't make any sense to leave it in cash when that's being depreciated on a day-by-day basis,
Oh,
even in Swiss francs.
yeah, no, the Swiss franc, I mean, every gold is making new highs in every currency. That's one thing people forget. I know the dollar has gone up a little bit, uh, the dollar index, but it's still only at 103. And in 1973, it was at 100 when gold was at 85. But Rafi, one thing I wanted to talk about, I almost forgot, is the silver miners. They did really well. Finally, First Majestic moved up quite a bit, 15%. Did you see that?
I saw that a whole bunch of them moved up in
Yeah.
double digits. I think Endeavor Silver was one of them, and First Majestic, Hecla Mining, I think went up 10%, something like that.
Didn't Nancy Pelosi buy Hecla Mining?
I
They
don't know. If she did, maybe I'll sell it.
She knows she bought it like a month or two ago. People noticed it. But I think one thing that's interesting is that a lot of times you get gold and silver do really well and the miners don't do too well. So I think that's a good sign, don't you think, Clive, that the miners did really well on Friday?
Uh, they went up a lot, but don't forget the silver price continued upwards after the stock market closed. So I think those people who've got silver miners probably will see a bit more gains on Monday as they play catch up with where the silver price closed. But it was a pretty strong rally as we went into the close, with many silver miners closing at the peaks. And I think the silver miners ETF, which whose symbols is SIL, it's not the only one out there which is exposed to silver miners, that rose by approximately the same amount, maybe even fractionally more than the silver price. And it should be rising faster than the silver price because of the leverage effect. Mario, you're on mute.
Thanks, Clive. I also saw a chart someone tweeted of the silver futures on Friday, and the volume was really heavy, which probably shows that, well, there's short covering and outright buying as well. Andy McCaskill, thank you for your super chat. Last time around, probably the only thing Trump didn't deliver on was returning to the gold standard. With him now saying he will save the dollar, could he still be thinking about the gold standard? Uh,
No,
I don't think the
no.
dollar can be saved, but yeah, you don't think, Rafi, I'll let you.
No, not at all. If you look at Daniel Oliver, Murmichan Capital, he had a paper out on the original sin of the Democrats and Bill Clinton, and he talks about Trump, and he says, look, he's going to vote for Trump. He supports Trump, but at the same time, like he's horrible on monetary policy and money, and it's not like he has a choice. He has to be. He's in an inflationary system, so he has a choice. Either he's going to collapse it or try to survive as long as he can within it. And and he's a low interest rate guy. That's what he calls himself.
Hmm.
And so no, he's not going to save the dollar. He's not even going to come close. The reason that he said that Murmichan says that he supports Trump is because culturally, and also he didn't start any new wars, which is also one, I think, his main accomplishment when he was president. So I hope for that. And but no, he's not going to save the dollar. It's not.
I,
Is
You,
I
you know, I agree with you, Rafi. He's certainly wants to keep the spending party going, so he'll keep. He won't do anything to strengthen the dollar because otherwise that would be cutting spending, and that's not good for anybody. But I think what we do see is we're heading slowly but surely towards some sort of reset. We don't know how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, but if we do get into a reset situation, they will need at that point to restore confidence in the currency. And what better way to restore confidence in the currency after it's failed than to put it onto some sort of commodity back system? And the obvious commodity you would use is gold, but it would require the gold price to be revalued at a very significantly higher level than it is today. There's figures all the way up into the hundreds of thousands that are needed, depending on what you take into account.
Yeah, someone just commented here, William PMCD. Uh, any comment on Andy Schectman suggesting $150,000 gold? Well, $150,000 gold would mean there's a melt up, hyperinflation, and I'm not even sure you'd be able to use the dollar anymore at 150,000. I think what Clive said there could be interesting. They could, if confidence in the system is lost, let's say we're at $4,000 gold and things are really bad, they could do like a revaluation over the weekend, and they could come out and say gold is now 10,000, and if you don't have gold, you won't benefit from it. Maybe we could end here, Rafi, with your view on this as we're approaching the hour mark.
Yeah. It could be over the weekend. One thing that I do see as doable is they could revalue it to, let's say, 35,000, and then say everyone gets their bank accounts cut into 1,000 pieces, and they have 1,000th of what they had, and then we go back to 35 and start over. That's basically what Israel did with the shekel and the new shekel. They said, okay, we have a new shekel. It's now 1,000 old shekels is a new shekel. Everybody gets their bank get cut into a thousandth and start over. That's exactly what they did, except instead of with gold, they did with dollars.
Yeah, I would add that it might go to 42,200 because the
Okay,
statutory price
fine.
of
That one too, whatever it is, doesn't make a difference.
$42.22. But yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, they goes up to 42,000, then they lop 1,000 off everything.
That's even what happened in Weimar. It went to a trillion or a trillion something, and then they cut off 12 zeros.
Yeah, the thing is, if you've got gold, you're still gonna be laughing.
Yeah, they
You'll
can't
still
they
have
can't they
it.
can't cut your gold in 1,000 pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have the gold before and you'll have it afterwards. It'll still be yours.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Just to let the viewers know, you can find Rafi's work on the Endgame Investor on, is that Substack now?
Yeah, Substack, yeah.
and also Rafi Farber on YouTube. And Clive, you can get in touch with him, Clive Thompson, on LinkedIn. And yeah, any final thoughts, guys, before we?
I just say the people need to be looking at the balance sheet of the joint balance sheet of the Fed and the Treasury. Historically we've only looked at the Fed, but realistically speaking, the liability of the government is the combination of the Fed and the Treasury, and that for the gold price changes the numbers a lot. Obviously, makes the gold price has to be a lot higher if you're looking at both.
Hmm, good
Okay,
point.
all right. Just want to thank everyone. Just one more super chat here. When World War III ends, is there anything you wished for except for toilet paper? It's Bob Hunter again. He's a bit of a
Yeah.
joker.
I'll go for the toilet paper. I think that's what we'll need.
Yeah, or like Einstein said, we're only gonna have sticks as if there's a World War III. Hopefully not. Anyway. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Rafi and Clive, for coming on. I appreciate it. And Rafi, hopefully, you'll be going back home soon. Let's pray for you, I would
Yeah,
say.
Tuesday, hopefully.
Good. All right. Take care, everyone. Let's see what I think Golden. Well, we're gonna open in about 55 minutes. We can have a look and see what happens.
All
Okay.
right.
Take care.
Bye,
Cheers. Bye
guys.
bye.
Bye.
Hi, Mario.
Hi, Clive. I've ended the stream. Uh,
I saw a very nice